The military academy stood on a rocky hill in the middle of Prime's largest continent. For 600 years, this place had turned wild cubs into proud warriors. The stone buildings were old and strong. The training grounds were wide and well used. Every wall held the names of heroes who had learned to fight within these grounds. Commandant walked through the main hall with heavy steps. Her silver-streaked fur showed her age, and the scars across her muzzle told stories of battles long past. She had trained thousands of young in her lifetime. She had seen the worst and the best of her kind. She had solved every problem that came her way. But today, she felt defeated. The sound of shouting reached her ears from the eastern training yard. She did not need to look to know what was happening. The 9th cohort was causing trouble again. She changed direction and walked toward the noise. 2 trainers stood at the edge of the yard, their ears flat against their heads in frustration. In the center of the yard, 12 young cubs were fighting each other instead of practicing their drills. The largest of them had pinned a smaller cub to the ground. His muscles were already showing beneath his brown fur, and his teeth were bared in anger. Around him, other cubs were pushing and shoving, ignoring the commands of their trainers completely. "Enough," trainer roared. His voice was loud enough to echo off the stone walls. The cubs did not even look at him. Stepped forward, the trainers saw her and stepped back with relief. Surely the commandant could control these wild ones. "All of you will stop, now." His voice was calm but filled with authority. The fighting slowed. The cubs looked at her with a mix of boredom and amusement. Released the cub he had pinned, but there was no fear in his eyes. He simply did not care. "Extra drills for all of you," announced. 4 hours, no evening meal. Shrugged, the others made small sounds of annoyance but nothing more. They had heard this before. They had been punished many times. It meant nothing to them. Watch them shuffle into formation with no energy and no discipline. These cubs came from the orbital colonies, places where lived far from the traditions of the. They had grown up wild and free, with no respect for authority. When they arrived at the academy 6 months ago, had believed she could shape them into proper warriors. She had been wrong. That evening sat in the council chamber with the 5 elders who guided the academy. The room was lit by soft blue lights, and the walls showed images of past victories. But the mood was dark. 3 trainers have asked to leave, reported. They say the 9th cohort cannot be trained. Trainer has developed a nervous twitch in his left eye. Trainer has stopped sleeping properly. Elder, the oldest of the council, stroked his graying whiskers. His eyes were still sharp despite his age. "What methods have you tried?" "Everything." His voice was tired. "Punishment does not work. They accept extra drills and reduced meals without complaint. Reward does not work. They laugh at praise and ignore privileges. Shame does not work. They have no connection to our traditions or our honor." "They are feral," said Elder, her voice filled with disgust. "The colonies have let them run wild for too long." "Perhaps they should be expelled," suggested Elder. "We cannot," shook her head. "Their families sent them here as a last hope. If we return them as failures, they will become criminals or worse, and the Academy's reputation will suffer. We have never expelled an entire cohort." The room fell silent. Outside, the sounds of the evening drills could be heard. Proper cubs from proper cohorts, training with discipline and focus. The 9th cohort was somewhere else, probably fighting among themselves again. Spoke slowly. "There is one option. It is unusual, perhaps even strange." Everyone looked at him. "The exchange program with the Terran Alliance," continued. "They have offered to send an observer to study our training methods, a human." The silence changed. It became uncomfortable. "A human?" Ears flattened. "What could a human possibly offer? They are soft creatures, no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons at all. They are barely stronger than their own children." "This human is a retired educator from their world," explained. "His name is Cole. He spent over 30 years teaching young humans. He has specifically requested to be placed with our most challenging students." Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want me to let an alien watch our greatest failure? You want him to see how far we have fallen with these cubs?" "I want you to solve a problem, Commandant." His voice became firm. "By any means necessary. If this human can help, we should let him try. If he cannot, we have lost nothing but a little pride." Wanted to argue. Everything in her training told her that this was wrong. They did not need help from outsiders, especially not from weak, clawless humans. But she had no other options. The ninth cohort was beyond her ability to control. "Fine," she said at last. "Bring the human, let him watch, but I expect nothing from this." 1 week later, a small transport ship landed at the academy. Stood at the landing pad with her arms crossed and her expression hard. She was not going to make this easy for the alien. The ship's door opened and Cole stepped out. He was smaller than she expected. His skin was smooth and brown without fur. His hair was gray at the sides and lines marked his face around his eyes and mouth. He wore simple clothes in dark colors and carried a small bag over one shoulder. There were no weapons on him, no armor, nothing that suggested strength or power. He looked around at the academy with calm, curious eyes. Then he saw and smiled. "Commandant," his voice was warm and gentle. "Thank you for having me. I promise to stay out of your way." Nodded stiffly. "The ninth cohort trains in the eastern yard. You may observe from the benches at the edge. Do not interfere with the training." "Of course," bowed his head slightly. "I am only here to watch and learn." Turned and walked away. She did not believe this human could do anything useful, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. Cole found the eastern training yard easily. It was a large open space with sand on the ground and wooden weapons on racks along the walls. Stone benches lined the edges, worn smooth by generations of observers. He chose a bench in the corner where he could see everything without being in the way. The ninth cohort arrived shortly after. 12 young, their fur ranging from dark brown to light gold. They moved in a messy group with no order or formation. Their ears were up and alert, but their eyes held no respect for the trainer who walked behind them. Trainer was a tall with black fur and tired eyes. He called out commands for the cubs to line up, but they moved slowly and carelessly. Some pushed each other. Others talked among themselves, ignoring him completely. Then they noticed. The talking stopped. 12 pairs of yellow eyes turned toward the bench where the human sat. Saw curiosity in those eyes and something else. Amusement. The largest cub walked toward him with a confident stride. His muscles moved beneath his fur, and his teeth showed in what might have been a smile. "Look at this," said loudly so all the others could hear. "They sent us a pet to watch our training." The other cubs laughed. A few made sounds of mock surprise. "No claws," observed a female cub with light golden fur. Her name was, and she moved with quick, sharp energy. "No fangs either. What happens if we misbehave, soft one? Will you bleed on us?" More laughter, simply smiled and pulled a small notebook from his bag. He opened it to a fresh page and took out a pen. "Please continue with your training," he said calmly. "Pretend I am not here." Snorted and turned away. "Useless," he muttered. The cubs went back to ignoring trainer's commands. For 3 days did nothing but watch. He sat on his bench each morning when training began. He took notes in his small book. He watched every drill, every exercise, every fight that broke out between the cubs. He never spoke unless someone spoke to him first. He never interfered with the training. The cubs tested him constantly. They fought in front of him, hopping for a reaction. Threw a smaller cub named against the wall hard enough to shake dust from the stones. Watched and wrote something in his book. Screamed insults at trainer until the trainer's face twisted with anger. Watched and wrote something in his book. They could not make him angry. They could not make him afraid. They could not make him leave. By the 3rd day, the cubs had grown bored with testing him. He was simply there, like the benches or the weapons racks, part of the training yard that held no interest. On the 4th day, something changed. The exercise that morning was combat practice. Cubs were paired together to practice fighting techniques. The smallest cub in the cohort was paired with. It was not a fair match, was twice size and 3 times as strong. Within moments he had pinned to the ground, but he did not stop there. He pressed his weight down harder, making cry out in pain. "Enough," trainer shouted. "The exercise is over." Ignored him. His teeth were bared now, not in a smile but in real anger. Had embarrassed him yesterday by scoring a point in a different exercise. This was revenge. The other trainers moved forward to separate them, but before they could reach the pair, stood up from his bench. He did not shout. He did not run forward. He simply walked to the edge of the training area and looked at. Then he shook his head slowly. It was a small movement, a simple gesture. But there was something in that gesture that stopped cold. It was not anger, did not look angry. It was not fear or threat. It was disappointment. looked at as if he had expected better, as if he had believed was capable of more than this, as if this behavior was beneath what could truly be. Released immediately, he stepped back, his ears flattening against his head. He felt something strange in his chest. It was not fear of punishment. He had never feared punishment. It was something else, something he could not name. Shame, perhaps, but deeper than shame. A feeling that he had let someone down, someone whose opinion, for reasons he did not understand, suddenly mattered. Nodded once, very slightly, and returned to his bench. He wrote something in his book. Stared at him for a long moment. Then he walked away to the other side of the yard, his tail low. That evening could not sleep. He lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. The other cubs were quiet around him, some already snoring, but his mind would not rest. Why did he care what the human thought? The human had no power over him, could not add extra drills or take away meals. He could not force to do anything. He was just a soft, weak alien with a notebook. But that look, that slow shake of the head, it burned in his memory like a hot coal. No one had ever looked at him like that before. Not his parents in the colonies, who were too busy to care. Not the trainers at the academy, who only showed anger and frustration. No one had ever looked at him like they expected him to be better than he was. Like they believed he could be more. Turned over in his bunk and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would show the human that he was more. He did not know why it mattered. He only knew that it did. In the other bunks, other cubs were having similar thoughts. Remembered how had nodded slightly when she completed a difficult jump correctly, just a small nod, but it had made her feel warm inside. Remembered how had looked at with disappointment, not at with pity. The human had not seen as weak or helpless. He had seen as someone who should have known better. Something was changing in the 9th cohort. None of them understood it yet, but a seed had been planted in their hearts, a tiny seed that would grow into something powerful. The human was watching, and somehow more than anything else they wanted him to be proud of what he saw. The change began slowly, like water wearing away stone. At first, the trainers did not notice. They were too busy preparing for each day's chaos to see that the chaos was becoming less. Stopped starting fights. He still argued sometimes, still pushed back when trainers gave orders, but he no longer attacked other cubs without reason. He moved through drills with more focus than before. His eyes kept drifting to the corner bench where sat with his notebook. Discovered that she could make the human nod if she performed her techniques correctly. The first time it happened, she felt her heart jump in her chest. It was just a small nod, a tiny movement of his head, but it meant he had seen her. He had noticed. After that, she practiced harder than ever before. Word spread through the 9th cohort in whispers. The human watches, the human sees, the human writes things in his book. They became obsessed with that book. What did he write in there? Was it good or bad? Did he write about them specifically or about the cohort as a whole? One afternoon, gathered enough courage to approach the bench during a break in training. "What do you write?" he asked quietly. His voice was shy. He was not used to speaking to adults without being forced to. Looked up from his notebook. His eyes were warm and kind. "Observations," he said. "Things I notice, things that impress me." "Things that impress you?" Ears lifted slightly. "About us?" "About all of you," smiled. "Would you like to know what I wrote about you today?" Nodded eagerly, then caught himself and tried to look less interested. He failed completely. "I wrote that showed excellent recovery after being knocked down in the second drill. He did not give up. He got back up 3 times. That shows strong spirit." Stared at him. No one had ever said anything like that about him before. The trainers only ever pointed out his mistakes. His cohort mates only ever teased him for being small. You notice that?" "I notice everything," said gently. "I see what each of you is capable of, even when you do not see it yourselves." Walked away with his head higher than it had been in months. That night he told the others what it said. They listened with hungry ears. "He writes about us," said. "He writes good things. When we do well, he writes it down." From that day forward, the competition began, not fighting and pushing like before, a different kind of competition. They competed to earn the human's nods. They competed to make him write in his book. Trainer noticed the change after a week. He reported to Commandant with confusion in his voice. "They are actually trying," he said. Completed a full set of drills without complaint, helped one of the younger cubs with her technique. They are working together. did not believe him at first. She went to the eastern yard herself to observe. What she saw made her ears flatten in shock. The ninth cohort was training, really training. They moved in formation. They followed commands. They practiced techniques with focus and determination, and constantly their eyes flickered to the corner bench where the human sat. That evening, found in the dining hall, he was eating alone, sampling the food with apparent enjoyment. She sat down across from him without asking. "What are you doing to them?" she demanded. Set down his cup of herbal tea. "Nothing, Commandant." "Do not play games with me," leaned forward. "Those cubs have been impossible for 6 months. No trainer could reach them. Now they act like proper students. They work hard, has not started a fight in 2 weeks. What did you do?" Was quiet for a moment. He looked at his tea, then at, "May I ask you something, Commandant?" Nodded sharply. "When these cubs misbehave, what happens to them?" "They are punished." Did not understand the question. "Extra drills, reduced meals, isolation, standard discipline." "And when they succeed, when they do something well?" Paused. "They are meeting expectations. That is what is required of them. We do not reward normal behavior." Nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. "On Earth," he said, "I taught for 32 years, mostly children that other teachers had given up on, children from broken homes, children who had never learned to trust adults, children who believed they were worthless." "And you fixed them with rewards?" His voice was skeptical. "No, rewards can be just as empty as punishments." Looked toward the door, as if seeing through it to the barracks where the cubs slept. "I fixed them with belief." "Belief?" "I believed in them. I looked at them and saw what they could become, not what they were, and I made sure they knew I saw it." He turned back to, "Discipline through fear creates obedience. Cubs who obey because they fear punishment will only behave when someone is watching to punish them. But discipline through pride creates something else, something stronger." "Pride?" "The pride of knowing that someone believes in you, someone sees your potential, someone is watching you with hope, not suspicion." Smiled softly. "Young ones will endure almost anything to live up to the image in a proud eye. They will work harder than punishment could ever make them work. They will push themselves beyond what fear could ever achieve." Sat back, her mind was struggling to accept what he was saying. It went against everything she had been taught about training warriors. "You are saying that you simply believe in them, and that changes their behavior." "I see what they could become, and I let them see that I see it." Picked up his tea again. "Your trainers look at those cubs and see problems, failures, disappointments. The cubs know this. They feel it every day, so they act like problems because that is what everyone expects." "And you expect differently." "I expect them to be extraordinary, and slowly they are beginning to believe they can be." Was silent for a long time. Outside, the night had fallen over the academy. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. "I have trained warriors for 40 years, she said finally. "I have never heard anything like this." "Perhaps," said gently, "that is why you could not reach these cubs, and why I could." Stood up, she did not know what to say. She did not know what to feel. Everything she believed about discipline and training was being questioned by this soft, clawless alien. But she could not argue with results. "Continue what you are doing," she said stiffly. "The Inter-Academy combat trials are in 2 months. If your methods can prepare them for that, I will admit that I was wrong about you." Nodded respectfully. "I will do my best, Commandant, but the cubs are the ones doing the real work. I am just watching." Walked away into the night, but his words stayed with her long after. "The cubs are the ones doing the real work. I am just watching." And yet somehow that watching was changing everything. The Inter-Academy combat trials came on a cold morning at the end of autumn. 20 academies from across had sent their best cohorts. Hundreds of young warriors gathered in the grand arena, a massive stone structure that had stood for 1,000 years. The 9th cohort of Prime Academy arrived with their heads held high. They wore their training uniforms clean and neat. They walked in formation without being told. Their eyes were focused and calm. Other cohorts looked at them with curiosity. The rumors had spread. The worst cohort in Prime's history was here. The cubs who could not be trained. Many expected entertainment at their expense. Commandant stood with the other academy leaders in the viewing area high above the arena floor. She felt nervous in a way she had not felt in decades. The 9th cohort had never passed the first elimination round in previous years. If they failed again, it would prove that nothing had really changed. Below, the cohorts were taking their places. The ninth would face the academy first, was famous for producing powerful warriors. Their cubs were older and larger with a long history of victories. In the observation gallery, a single human sat with a notebook on his lap. Cole had been given a seat normally reserved for honored guests. He had refused the comfortable chair and asked instead for a simple bench where he could see the arena clearly. The cubs of the ninth looked up at him. He nodded once and smiled. They felt their courage grow. The first bout began with the sound of a great horn. The cohort charged forward with overwhelming force. They were confident, almost lazy in their power. They expected an easy victory. But the ninth did not break. Stood at the front of their formation. 6 months ago, he would have charged forward alone, seeking glory and forgetting his teammates. Now he held position, his body a shield for those behind him. When a warrior swung at him, he blocked and stepped back, drawing the attacker into range of counterstrike. The cohort moved as one. Each cub knew where the others were. Each cub trusted the others to do their part. Once the smallest and weakest had become their eyes, he called out warnings when enemies approached from blind spots. His voice was clear and confident. Listen to him without question. The first bout ended in defeat for the ninth. They had fought well, but they were simply more experienced. The score was close, but a loss was a loss. In the past, this would have been the moment when the ninth fell apart. They would have blamed each other. They would have argued and fought. They would have lost all hope. Instead, they gathered together in their corner of the arena. They talked quietly, pointing out what had worked and what had not. There was no blaming. There was no anger. They were a team. Up in the gallery, wrote something in his book. His eyes were warm with pride. The second bout was harder. They had adjusted their strategy. They targeted, trying to silence the voice that guided the ninth. For a terrible moment, it seemed to work, was knocked down and nearly pinned. But was there? The same who had once bullied without mercy now threw himself in front of the attacking. He took blows that were meant for his smaller teammate. He gave time to recover and get back on his feet. The bout ended in another loss, but the margin was smaller. They were not smiling anymore. Between rounds, the ninth cohort stood in a circle, spoke first. "We can beat them. We are closer than we have ever been. One more push." "They are targeting," said. "We need to protect him better." No's voice was firm. "They target me because they fear my voice. Let them come. I am not afraid." The others looked at him with new respect. The smallest cub had become one of the bravest. The horn sounded for the third bout. This time, the ninth attacked first, led the charge with a speed that surprised the. She broke through their line and created chaos in their formation. Behind her, the others poured through the gap. They fought back hard. They were still stronger, still more experienced. But something had changed. The ninth moved with a purpose that could not be stopped. Every time one fell, another took their place. Every time they were pushed back, they pushed forward again. Faced the leader, a massive warrior nearly twice his size. The fight was brutal. Was knocked down once, twice, 3 times. Each time he got back up. His body was screaming with pain, but his spirit was unbroken. He thought of in the gallery. He thought of the proud nod, the kind eyes, the belief that he could be more than a brawler and a bully. He was more. He would prove it. With a roar that echoed through the arena, threw himself at the leader one final time. They crashed together, and when they fell, it was the who did not get up. The horn sounded. The third bout was over. The ninth cohort had won. The arena fell silent with shock. Then the cheering began, not just from Prime supporters, but from warriors of other academies who had witnessed something remarkable. A cohort that should have been defeated easily had risen to claim victory. But the trials were not over. There were more bouts to fight, more opponents to face. The ninth cohort fought through the afternoon, winning some and losing some. Each loss taught them something. Each victory gave them strength. When the final scores were counted at sunset, the judges announced the results. The ninth cohort of Prime Academy had placed 3rd overall, 3rd out of 20 academies. It was the highest finish in the academy's modern history. Commandant could not believe what she was hearing. The other academy leaders stared at her with a mix of envy and confusion. How had she done it? How had she transformed the worst cohort into one of the best? She did not answer. She looked instead at the observation gallery, where Cole was already on his feet. The human was applauding. His hands came together again and again, and on his weathered face, tears were running down his cheeks. The cubs of the ninth looked up at him. They saw his tears, they saw his pride. And then they celebrated. Their voices filled the arena with joy. They hugged each other and shouted and laughed. They had proven themselves. They had shown everyone what they could become. But more than the victory, more than the third-place finish, they celebrated because was proud of them. That in the end was the only victory that truly mattered. Winter came to Prime with gentle snow and cold winds. The academy grounds were quiet now, the training yards empty in the mornings. The cubs of the ninth cohort had moved on to advanced training, preparing for their final months before graduation. Cole stood at the window of his small room watching the snow fall. He had been at the academy for one full cycle of seasons. Spring had turned to summer, summer to autumn, and now winter wrapped the world in white. It was time for him to return to Earth. He had already packed his bag. There was not much in it. His clothes, his notebook now filled with observations from cover to cover, a few gifts from the trainers and staff who had grown to respect him. A knock came at his door. "Come in," called. The door opened and the ninth cohort entered. All 12 of them, their fur now sleek with the growth of young adulthood. They were not cubs anymore. They were warriors on the edge of graduation. Stood at the front, he had grown taller in the past year, his muscles now those of a full warrior. But his eyes were softer than before. The anger that had once lived there had been replaced by something calmer. "Teacher Cole," said. His voice was steady, but there was emotion underneath. "We wanted to see you before you left." Smiled and set down the shirt he had been folding. "I was hoping you would come." The cohort moved into the room, filling the small space with their presence. They stood in a loose circle around him, their ears forward and alert. "We brought you something," said. She stepped forward and presented a long, wrapped bundle. Took it with careful hands. He unwrapped it slowly, and his breath caught in his throat. It was a blade, steel, the metal dark and beautiful. The edge was perfect, sharp enough to cut shadow. On the flat of the blade, names had been etched in elegant script. 12 names, one for each member of the ninth cohort. On the handle, a single word was carved in the human language: pride. "We had it made by the finest smith in the capital," explained. "It took us months to save for it. We wanted you to have something to remember us." Could not speak. His eyes were filling with tears. "We asked Commandant to explain what you did for us," continued. "She told us what you said about discipline and belief, about seeing what we could become." "We understand now," added. His voice was stronger than it had been a year ago. He stood straight and proud, no longer hiding in the shadows. "You did not train us, you did not punish us or reward us. You simply believed in us. And that changed everything," finished. Held the blade with trembling hands. He looked at each of them in turn, these young warriors who had once been wild and uncontrollable. They had grown so much. They had become so much more than anyone had expected. "I did not change you," said, his voice thick with emotion. "You changed yourselves, I only watched." "But you watched with pride," said. "You saw what we could be even when we could not see it ourselves. That is a gift beyond measure." The cohort was silent for a moment. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Spoke again. "When we graduate, we will be assigned to different ships, separate missions across the fleet. We may never serve together again." Nodded. "That is the nature of military life." "Yes," ears lifted. "But we made a promise to each other. No matter where we go, no matter what happens, we will conduct ourselves so that if you ever heard of our actions, you would nod and write something good in your book." The tears spilled from his eyes now. He did not try to hide them. "The warriors of Call Us the Humans Pack," said. There was no shame in his voice, only pride. "They meant it as an insult, but we have chosen to take it as an honor. We are the Humans Pack. We are yours." Set the blade down gently and opened his arms. One by one, the cohort came to him. They embraced him carefully, aware of his soft human body, but the warmth of the embrace was real and deep. "I am so proud of you," whispered. "All of you, more than words can say." The farewell lasted until the sun began to set. When the cohort finally left, stood alone in his room with the blade in his hands. He traced the names with his finger, remembering each face. 2 days later, Cole boarded a ship bound for Earth. Half the academy came to see him off. Commandant was there, her posture stiff but her eyes warm. "You have given us something valuable," she said. something we did not know we needed. You had it all along, replied. You simply forgot to use it. The ship lifted off and climbed into the sky. Watched through the window as the academy grew smaller and smaller. He held his notebook in his lap, the pages full of a year's worth of observations. After he was gone, Commandant returned to her office. She sat at her desk for a long time, thinking. Then she began to write a proposal. 1 month later, the Academy created a new position. It was called the Proud Observer. The role had no disciplinary power. It issued no commands. It gave no punishments or rewards. The Proud Observer simply watched. They sat at the edge of training yards with notebooks in their laps. They noticed when cubs did well. They nodded in approval. They believed in what the cubs could become. Every cohort that passed through the academy from that day forward trained with one truth in their hearts. Someone was watching. Someone believed they could be extraordinary. Years passed. The cubs of the 9th cohort became warriors, then officers, then legends. They served on ships across the galaxy. They fought in battles that would be remembered for generations. And always they conducted themselves with discipline and honor. When asked the secret of their strength, they gave the same answer every time. We had someone who watched us like we were already heroes. After that, we could not bear to prove him wrong. On Earth, an old man sat in his garden with a blade hanging on the wall behind him. Children and played around him, and visitors from across the galaxy sometimes came to meet him. He still had his notebook. He still watched the young ones with careful eyes, and when they did something well, he still nodded and smiled. Because Cole understood something that trainers and commanders often forgot. Discipline through fear creates obedience. Discipline through pride creates warriors. And the greatest gift you can give to the young is the simple belief that they are capable of being extraordinary. All you have to do is watch them with proud eyes and let them rise.